Hello everyone. My name is Travis, the Teen Services Librarian with Spartanburg County Public Libraries, and this workshop is 1000 Words, Storytelling in Comics and Graphic Novels. The point of this workshop is to take a quick dive into the history of graphic storytelling, highlighting techniques used by writers and artists to tell stories where pictures worth 1000 words are just as important as the text. First of all, let me say that I'm a big advocate of reading graphic novels as literature. Traditionally, comics and graphic novels have been written off as junk reading or as not a real book. But to paraphrase Will Eisner, a great writer and comic scholar, history has looked favorably upon art and on a written word, but the combination of the two took a really long time to have considerable literary merit. But why do I love them? Because they're fun. It's easy to gather and retain information from them. They incorporate multiple art forms, and there's a variety of stories featuring diverse representation, and they cover every genre. So there are graphic novels out there for everybody, no matter what kind of books you like to read. Specifically in the teen collection of the Spartanburg County Public Libraries, we have a large collection of comics like Batman and the Avengers, and more literary graphic novels like Drama by Raina Telgemeier and Honor Girl by Maggie Thrash. Our growing collection of manga features titles like Naruto and My Hero Academia, and we have a wonderful selection of nonfiction titles like March Book 1, a memoir by the late John Lewis, and They Called Us Enemy, a memoir by George Takei. There's also a large selection of how-to guides to help build writing and drawing skills while on your way to creating your own graphic novels. Now to get down to business. We're here to talk about graphic storytelling, and just a quick note, graphic does not mean like R-rated violence. It simply means that pictures help drive the story. This is important because pictures are often associated with children's books, but in reality they are an excellent storytelling device. You read the images just as much as the words. To quote Will Eisner once again, in text alone, the process of reading involves word-to-image conversions. Comics accelerate that by providing the image. Think for a second about when you watch a movie or television show. You can see the world. You have the vision in your mind without the need to have every detail written out for you. Graphic narratives are a happy medium between film and books. You get words to convey the more complex ideas, and pictures to help you digest them without having to use your mind's eye. It basically gives the reader a shortcut. Now for a brief history of sequential art, that is, art organized in a sequence to tell a graphic narrative. In the US, graphic narratives began with the advent of political cartoons, like this famous Join or Die image from 1754. Which led to beginnings of sequential art in the late 1800s in the form of comic strips. The 1930s marked a rise of popularity of comic books, in which the two largest US companies, Marvel and DC, began to thrive. Today, however, the largest market in the world for graphic novels is in Japan because of its thriving manga industry. But despite the long history of graphic storytelling, again, it took a long time to be recognized as literature. For example, it wasn't until 2006 when Gene Luen Yang's American-Born Chinese finally became the first graphic novel recognized for excellence in teen literature. This one summer, ironically, became the first graphic novel to win the Caldecott, all the way in 2015, and the Caldecott is an award actually dedicated to artwork. Now we're going to get into the actual writing aspect of the presentation. First of all, what are the elements that make up a good story? Not just a graphic narrative, but any story, no matter the format. While you might already have drawings and ideas about what you want to draw for your comic or graphic novel, you also have to do the writing. You need to know the story that you are telling and how the art and words are going to work together to tell that story. Where does your story take place? Who are the characters? What are their motivations? What challenges are they going to face? How are they going to overcome those challenges? And what does it all mean? To get started, let's look at how other writers and artists established their settings and introduced the characters. Like in this example from Honor Girl by Maggie Thrash, one method is to simply tell the readers directly. We have a place, a reference in time, and the exposition or backstory needed to help move the story forward. In this example from Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me, the artist includes an establishing shot. This is a very popular filmmaking technique that you will see in movies and TV shows, where the camera pans in on a location to show us where the next scene is taking place. This scene takes place in a bowling alley, as established on the left panel. And then on the next panel, in a large spread, it shows us the characters that are all going to be in the scene and where they're seated in relationship to each other. In this example from Crush by Svetlana Chimkova, the artist simply uses visual clues. By looking over the page, the audience can tell the scene takes place in the gymnasium at school. Class is just beginning based on the sound effects, and the main characters in the scene either already have fully developed features that draw the reader's attention, or they develop features as they gain the attention of other characters that help bring them into the scene. And now to look at some basic ways writers use to express narrative and dialogue. In this example from Crush, the writer uses narrative boxes. Narrative boxes are a way the writer can speak directly to the audience, introducing characters, settings, and plot without necessarily having to speak through the characters. Like in this example from Honor Girl, you might notice that the narrative boxes do not have a tail to designate speaker. That shows a contrast between the spoken dialogue and the exposition. Here we have a complex scene with a lot of dialogue bubbles. Instead of the writer telling a story through narrative boxes, the story's characters are advancing the plot through dialogue. Notice in the first two panels it's a group conversation. They establish the setting, and they establish the characters in the space in relationship to each other. As the conversation progresses and evolves, characters start speaking directly to each other and get close-ups in a shot, reverse shot dialogue, similar to what you will see in a movie or TV show. This page is an excellent example of how the artist uses the dialogue bubbles to convey the emotions of the characters. In traditional words-only storytelling, the narrator might have to say something like, "She said excitedly," "She was very happy to hear." But since we have the visual images, you can see the excitement in the volume expressed with the sharp edges of the dialogue bubbles. You see surprise with squiggly lines, and you see happiness highlighted in flowers. This page from Drama by Raina Telgemeier is another great example of an establishing shot that notes where the scene is taking place and when with a dialogue bubble. But it's also a great example of left to right, top to bottom dialogue. The dialogue fills the space beginning at the top of each panel, which is especially helpful for new graphic novel readers to help avoid confusion. It's very easy to navigate and know who is speaking and how to follow the sequence. In this section, we'll talk about some expressive techniques that you can't really do with words and dialogue alone. The first expressive technique is no words on the page. Let the illustration do the talking for you. The image here conveys the emotions and actions well enough that you don't need extra narration or dialogue. The artist fills the room with negative space because this is a dramatic scene, and the reader does not necessarily need elaborate renderings of the entire room because the focus is on the characters and their emotions. Writers and artists often use action cues to help progress the story. Again, in this example from This One Summer, there's no dialogue or narration, just a few words of sound effects. The images and action cues are enough to convey what's happening in the scene. In this example from Scott Pilgrim by Brian Lee O'Malley, the artist uses the character's eyes to help the audience navigate the scene. The establishing shot shows us where the characters are seated in relationship to each other, but pay attention to the character's eyes. Not only are they telling the reader who is being spoken to, they're conveying emotions, and the character's eyes direct the reader's attention to the next speaker. And now it's your turn. Your turn to write your own narratives, create your own characters, bring your own stories to life. And while this presentation covers ways that graphic novel artists tell their stories, and hopefully gives you food for thought on how to create your own stories, unfortunately I cannot teach you how to draw. But know that if your story is good enough, you can still create a graphic novel no matter what your skill level is as an artist. Take, for example, Maggie Thrash, writer of Honor Girl and Lost Soul Be at Peace. I have no art background. It is important for me to tell people that you can go write a graphic novel. You don't have to go study art in school. Just read them, study them, and you can do it. Here is a sample of a webcomic first created by Maggie as a teenager. "14 years later, you can see that the artist's style really hasn't changed that much, but she has a few award-winning graphic novels under her belt. To help get you started on your own comic or graphic novel, we are offering you a free pick-me-up kit with everything you need, including a blank comic, colored pencils, and a felt tip artist pin. To request your free pick-me-up kit, you can find the link in the video description and in our bio on Instagram at SCPL Teens. All pick-me-up kits are available on a first-come, first-served basis, so hurry and request yours while supplies last. Thank you, and good luck creating your own comics and graphic novels. Remember, if you're in need of some extra motivation, there's a wonderful, diverse collection of comics, graphic novels, and art instruction books waiting for you at the library.